Hello, Super Sixth Graders. Today we're going to be continuing with our rational numbers unit. And in the last class, we looked at multiplying and dividing with integers. Today we're going to talk about converting between fractions and decimals. In the next classes, we'll be looking at multiplying and dividing with rational numbers. So just really quickly, I want to review what rational numbers are. We've been talking about these numbers for a while, but I will remind you that these are numbers that can be written as a fraction. So we'll take a look at different types of rational numbers here together. Before we get there, I want to point out that we have been focusing on rational numbers. There are also irrational numbers. Most of our work in pre-algebra is not going to involve irrational numbers, but let's just talk about the difference between them really briefly. So a rational number, as you have learned and been able to tell me, is a number that can be expressed as a fraction. It includes those positive and negative numbers. It also includes zero. Irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be expressed as a simple fraction. So what happens when you have a fraction that is an irrational number? When it's written as a decimal, it results in a non-repeating decimal or a decimal that does not end. We'll take a look at those types of numbers in some of our examples. I wanted to show you just this graphic, which shows us sort of the kingdom of numbers, the kingdom of rational numbers that we have been learning about. So we've been learning about rational numbers, and you know that those are numbers that can be written as a fraction. Within that kingdom, there are whole numbers. Those numbers are 0, 1, 2, 5, 8, 100, all of those counting numbers that you've been learning since you were probably 2. So whole numbers are a subset of rational numbers. Then also in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about integers. Integers are those negative and positive numbers. They're going to include all of the whole numbers. So they also include 3 and 5 and all of those numbers. The integers are numbers that can be written as a fraction. They include the whole numbers that are positive, and also those whole numbers that are negative numbers as well. And then we have rational numbers. So rational numbers include all of those numbers that we just talked about, and then numbers like 5 and 8/10. Rational numbers can be written in a couple of different ways. There could be a terminating decimal. So that's a decimal that ends, such as 1 and 5/10. Or you could see a repeating decimal. That repeating decimal would just continue either with the same number or with a pattern that repeats. And there's a little symbol that we place over the part that repeats that shows us which of the digits repeat. And that is our bar notation for repeating decimals. Let's do a couple of examples. So if we are asked to convert a fraction or a mixed number to a decimal, there are a couple of different ways that we could do this. I'm going to show you one strategy here in example 1, part A. So I have -2 and 1/4 written as a decimal. When I look at this number, I notice that I have a whole number part. That's the -2. And I have this fraction part. This is, it's going to be a -1/4, right? Because that fraction is going to carry the same sign as its whole number part. I have a fraction that I'm hoping we are recognizing as one of our benchmark fractions. Friends, there are some fractions that when we look at them, we may be able to say, I know what that number is as a decimal. This should be one of them. If you don't know this number as a decimal, I'm going to give it to you right now. So this number as a decimal is going to be 0.25 or 25 hundredths. And so I can easily write this as the whole number, 2, -2, plus the fraction written as a decimal, -25 hundredths. And then the addition is quite simple. Because these are both negative numbers, I'm just going to add the two parts so that I have 2 and 25 hundredths. And then I'm going to keep the sign because both of my add-ins are negative. So that's going to be a -2 and 25 hundredths. So that's a super straightforward way of rewriting a number like that. I want to name a couple of other benchmark fractions that you probably know. So 3/4 is a benchmark fraction. We know that that's written as 75 hundredths. 1/2, very, very common benchmark fraction, is written as 5/10 or 50 hundredths. So there are a few more. We're not going to go over them right here, but I just wanted to name that as something that you may recognize. Oh boy, 5/11ths, not a benchmark fraction. So when you see a number like 5/11ths and you're being asked to write it as a decimal, you might have a calculator. So you might be able to, you're not going to have your phone in class, but here's an image of a phone calculator. You might have a calculator and you might be able to divide 5 by 11. That is the process for changing this into a decimal. I want to show you that you could also set up a long division problem so that you have 5, that's the numerator, being divided by 11. Friends, I have so many of you that have said, I need to review long division. So we're going to do a really, really quick overview of long division here. It will be a skill that we'll be using for this part of our unit. So it's something that we can continue to review over the next few weeks. 11 being divided into 5. I can see that that is a number that is bigger than 5. So it's going to go in there just as a part, right? So I'm going to have a decimal answer here. I'm going to add a decimal, and then I'm going to add a few zeros, maybe 4, since I can see right here this is going to be carried out a ways. And I'm going to carry that decimal up right above this part down here so that it lines up nicely for my answer. Then I'm going to begin the long division process. My first part of long division is to divide. So I'm going to divide 11 into, I'm going to say, can 11 go into 5? No, it cannot. So I'm just going to put a 0 as a placeholder here. So I've got divide. And I'm going to check to see if 11 can go into the next number, which would be 50. And it can. It can go in 4 times. So now that I've divided, my next step is to multiply. 4 times 11, which gives me 44. So I've divided, now I've multiplied. Next, I'm going to subtract. 50 minus 44 is going to give me 6, a difference of 6. So subtract is step 3. And then I'm going to bring down, and this is really the last part of our long division algorithm. So bring down, and you would bring down whatever digit is there. In this case, it happens to be a 0. Once I've done that, I'm going to start all over again, but this time I'm going to look to see if 11 goes into this 60 here. So I'm starting back up at the top where I divide. 11 goes into 60 5 times. Next I multiply. 5 times 11 is 55. Now I subtract. 60 minus 55 is 5. And finally, I bring down this 0 so that now I have 50 again. And I can see that this is going to be a pattern, right? I could continue this, and guess how long I could continue it? Forever and ever, because this is going to be a repeating decimal. So I'll just finish this out here. It's going to continue to divide out and repeat so that I could write my answer here as I have 45 hundredths that is repeating. Awesome sauce. So I want to show you one additional thing before you go on to your self-assessment and, well, actually your try it out, then your self-assessment, and then your practice. And the additional thing that I want to show you is taking a decimal and writing that decimal in fraction form. This is likely review, so I'll go over this relatively quickly. If I have a decimal, that I want to write as a fraction and I want to write it in simplest form, I'm going to pay first close attention to place value. So I will remind you that this 2 here is in my tenths place value, and this 6 here is in my hundredths place value. So I'm going to set up a fraction using the place value of the last digit in my number. That place value for this number is hundredths. So I'm going to write something over 100. And then to determine what to write over 100, it is everything after the decimal. So this 26 here is going to be written right over my 100, excuse me. Awesome. So I have my fraction. It's 25 over 100. The only thing I want to do now is look back at my directions or my ask and see, is there anything else that I need to do? Probably always you're going to be asked to write these numbers in simplest form. That means I'm going to need to write this fraction in lowest terms. I can do this pretty easily because I can divide. I'm noticing that both my numerator and my denominator are even numbers. They're also positive numbers. So I'm going to just divide them both by 2 and see where that gets me. 26 divided by 2 is 13. And 100 divided by 2 is 50. And this is in lowest terms, so I am done there. Okay, you are now going to try this out in your Edpuzzle. And when you finish with that, you're going to go over to Big Ideas for the self-assessment. And that is really it for this lesson. Go ahead and try this out. And now you can move on to your self-assessment and Big Ideas.